Every empire says its money is permanent. Rome said it with silver, Britain said it with sterling, America said it with the dollar, and every time the ending began the same way, not with soldiers at the gates, not with one dramatic collapse, but quietly, inside ledgers, promises, and exceptions to rules everyone thought were unbreakable. The monetary order does not break when money disappears. It breaks when trust becomes too expensive to maintain. This is Unseen Hand, revealing the hidden forces that shaped money, empires, and your future. Most people think the changing world order is about flags, armies, alliances, and speeches. America versus China, BRICS versus the G7, East versus West. But that is only the visible layer. Underneath it is a darker question. Who gets to create the asset the rest of the world must hold? For decades, the answer was obvious. The world needed dollars. Oil was priced in dollars. Debt was issued in dollars. Trade was settled in dollars. Central banks stored dollars. Crises were rescued with dollars. The dollar became more than America's currency. It became the operating system of the world. And that system still dominates. IMF reserve data still shows the dollar as the largest official reserve currency. BIS data shows the dollar on one side of 88% of foreign exchange trades. So this is not a dollar collapse story. It is more dangerous than that. The world still needs the dollar, but it is no longer sure it can trust the system around it. To understand why, go back to 1944. The Second World War was not over, but the winners were already designing the peace. In Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 44 Allied nations gathered to rebuild global money from the wreckage of depression and war. They wanted stability. They wanted trade. They wanted to avoid the currency chaos of the 1930s, when governments devalued against each other like rivals cutting ropes on the same sinking ship. The agreement looked simple. Other currencies would be tied to the dollar. The dollar would be tied to gold, and gold would be convertible at $35 an ounce. America became the anchor because America had the gold, the factories, the navy, and the intact industrial base. Europe was broken. Japan was broken. Britain was exhausted. The United States emerged not only as a superpower, but as the balance sheet behind the world. But inside the design was a hidden flaw. The world needed dollars to grow, but the more dollars America supplied, the less credible the gold promise became. America had to do two opposite things at once: provide the world with enough dollars and convince the world those dollars were still as good as gold. That contradiction had a name: the Triffin dilemma. Bretton Woods was not permanent. It was a countdown. By the 1960s, the countdown was visible. America was spending on Vietnam, domestic programs, overseas bases, and the Cold War. Dollars flowed outward. Foreign central banks accumulated them, and more countries began asking the dangerous question: if all these dollars are claims on gold, is there enough gold? France, under Charles de Gaulle, pushed the question into public view. French officials converted dollars into physical gold. Other countries watched. The pressure grew. Then, on August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon announced that the United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. He called it temporary. It was not temporary. The old system had gold at the center. The new system had Treasury bonds at the center. Foreign governments no longer held dollars because they could turn them into gold. They held dollars because the deepest, most liquid, most trusted market in the world was the market for United States government debt. This was the new machine. America issued the reserve asset. The world earned dollars through trade. Those dollars returned to America through Treasury markets. American deficits became foreign reserves. Foreign savings became American financing. It was a loop, as long as everyone trusted the center. And that trust gave America an extraordinary privilege. It could borrow in its own currency. It could run deficits others could not run. It could sanction enemies by cutting them off from dollar channels. It could rescue allies through swap lines. It could turn its own debt into the world's safest asset. But every privilege has a shadow. The more the world depends on your money, the more your domestic decisions become global events. A Federal Reserve rate hike can break borrowers overseas. A Treasury auction can shake markets in Asia. A banking panic in New York can freeze credit in Europe. A sanctions decision in Washington can change the reserve strategy of countries thousands of miles away. The dollar system looks like a market, but in a crisis it behaves like an empire. And here is the darkest part. The monetary order is not breaking because the dollar is weak. It is breaking because the dollar is too powerful. For decades, countries complained about American dominance while depending on American liquidity. They wanted an alternative to the dollar until crisis arrived. Then they wanted dollars. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, the Federal Reserve opened emergency swap lines to foreign central banks because dollar funding markets were freezing around the world. In 2020, during the pandemic panic, it happened again. The hidden truth was exposed. The global economy had become a dollar machine, but much of the machine existed outside the United States. Euro-dollar markets, offshore banks, dollar debts, foreign exchange swaps, shadow banking structures. A reserve currency is not just a tool of trade. It is a political weapon, a safety valve, a debt instrument, and a surveillance network, all disguised as neutral money. Now look at the modern signals. First, sanctions. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Western governments froze or immobilized Russian central bank reserves. Whatever one thinks of the politics, the monetary message was unmistakable. Reserves are not just assets, they are permissions. If reserves can be frozen, are they truly reserves? Second, gold. Central banks have been buying gold at elevated levels. The World Gold Council reported more than 860 tons of net central bank buying in 2025, after more than 1,000 tons in 2024. Gold pays no interest. It does not innovate. It does not update. But it has one advantage: no one else's liability. Third, trade fragmentation. More countries are testing local currency trade. China and Russia, India and Gulf states, Brazil and China. These arrangements are still limited, messy, and nowhere near replacing the dollar. But they reveal the direction, not one new system, many partial escapes. Fourth, debt. United States public debt has passed $39 trillion. Treasury data for fiscal year 2026 already shows hundreds of billions in net interest costs. The world still buys treasuries. But the question has changed. It is no longer simply, is America rich? It is, at what interest rate does the system remain believable? Fifth, payment rails. China has built CIPS for renminbi cross-border payments. Europe talks about strategic autonomy. BRICS countries discuss local currency settlement. Stablecoins move dollar claims through crypto rails faster than many banks can process international transfers. Different pipes, same desire. Escape the choke points. This does not mean the dollar collapses tomorrow. That is the amateur version of the story. Reserve currencies usually do not die in one dramatic scene. They lose monopoly first. Then they lose inevitability. Then they lose the assumption that there is no alternative. Sterling did not vanish when Britain weakened. It remained important for decades, but the direction had changed. The same may be true now. The future may not be a Chinese yuan world, or a gold world, or a Bitcoin world, or a BRICS currency world. It may be something more unstable, a world with no single trusted center, a world of blocks, parallel payment systems, political reserves. Money that follows alliances, transactions that ask, quietly, whose system are you inside? Every empire says its money is permanent. But money is never just metal, paper, or code. Money is memory. It remembers who paid, who defaulted, who confiscated, who inflated, who kept promises when keeping them was painful. The question is not whether the dollar disappears. It probably will not. The question is whether the dollar remains the one currency everyone trusts when there is nowhere else to go. Because when the anchor of the world becomes a weapon, every nation begins looking for a lifeboat. And when too many lifeboats leave the ship may still float. But it is no longer the order. It is only the largest wreckage in the water. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. We show you where to look.